So much has changed. I've been gone for too long. They beat us to the bone. No one knows how.
All right, Wolfenstein, a game we're very, very familiar with. What have you guys got on at Gamescom? What are we seeing here?
So publicly, we have a public hands-on, which is one of the. It's chapter 6 of the game, so it's like a third into the experience. It's very sort of action-heavy, and then behind the scenes here we have backstage a more invite-only thing, which is early on in the game. It's the end of the prologue leading into sort of the full game that is only playable for journalists.
What we've played before is obviously a very heavily action-oriented game. You've mentioned that the demo here, though, would depending on if you explore, it's going to maybe take you nearly an hour. So is there an element of exploration in New Order?
Yeah, we see the game as more of an action-adventure game than a straight-up shooter. So if you take the time to explore, you'll find some neat stuff. And there's a large storytelling component, and we like all kinds of things like puzzle solving, sort of vary the experience for the player. Those are the things that we really like. Having different kinds of game mechanics being introduced in various sections. The whole game is just constructed as a long, epic journey from beginning to end, and you go through very different things throughout that journey.
We're talking about the sort of the puzzle aspect, certainly these different elements other than just shooting. You said that's something that you guys want to see, and you think that that's something that first-person shooters need as well? Well, sorry, should I say first-person shooter adventures need to really differentiate themselves in a very, very crowded market?
I don't really look at it that way. We make the game that we want to make, that we feel the most passionate about, that we think is most interesting to play. But obviously, there's more storytelling, there's more adventuring in this game than in any other previous Wolfenstein game. But we feel really comfortable with that. That's sort of our wheelhouse anyway, as developers, and we're really happy with how things are going.
Well, where are you guys in development right now? I mean, are we coming close to the end? As I understand it, it's now 2014. What's the reason? You got too much more to put in?
Yeah, I mean, the game is huge. It's really, really big, and because we have this obsession with creating a varied gameplay experience, it's not enough that the sort of gunplay is there. You know, we have unique things that happen on each level, and all of those sections needs to be really polished. You know, it's just about taking the whole game to a really, really high level of polish.
That's what you guys are doing between now and the new launch, yeah?
Yes.
Well, what personally for you, I understand we can't really spoil anything about the story, but is there any particular element of the game that you're personally proud of or you personally enjoyed?
Yeah, it's there's so much. I mean, it's conceived conceptually as what we think is a complete marriage between storytelling and gameplay. And there's a lot of cool stuff in there. What I really like, and that isn't really reflected in the stuff that we've shown so far, is just it's actually quite a lot of an ensemble piece in terms of characters. So the sort of array of people that you meet in this world is interesting, and there's a lot of cool people to meet.
I was at after the Sony briefing last night. They actually had like a sort of meeting of minds between the likes of David Cage and a few other folk, who developed for PlayStation, talking about the element of storytelling in video games. And there's an interesting point made that for any non-interactive cutscene, you immediately alienate the player because you don't feel like you're in control of your actions at that point. How have you guys approached storytelling in Wolfenstein?
I think there's definitely a component like that. Like when you play, you want to be in control, but so then what you can do then is well, there's a lot of technical stuff, game development stuff, but there's a component there that if you want to convey an idea or some information to the player, you have to direct their attention at that idea. And there are ways of, if it's small and simple stuff, there are ways of doing that so that your player finds that naturally within the environment. But if it's more complicated than that, you can do, there are things you can do that feel sort of kind of interactive, which work well sometimes. But sometimes you just need to say, okay, here's some important stuff, sit down and watch this. But the key there is to make those things interesting. I think that's the overarching problem, is that a lot of the time when a developer asks the player to sit down and watch something, they're not providing something interesting to watch. And so I think that's the root of the problem, is it's not necessarily about that you have to interact all the time. I mean, it's fine to, and I think we do that in real life all the time too. Sometimes you just sit and watch something, or you have an experience that somebody else provides for you, and that's fine. It's just that that experience has to be rewarding and has to give you something.
You find that in trying to put across particular subjects, particular themes in Wolfenstein, less is more? Would that be the case for a man that's all about shooting? It's less about talking and more about, say, audio or musical cues, and particularly with the facial animation being so fantastic in Wolfenstein, you can almost, like, even a nervous tick would do more than, say, a string of sentences to try and explain a particular situation or a particular theme.
Yeah, but it all depends on the context and what you're trying to convey. So, oh yeah, and that goes for all kinds of storytelling, where visual storytelling, that sometimes you can convey something through a look or through something that isn't said. And sometimes you need people saying things. It's just it all depends on what you're trying to convey and what kind of emotion you want the player to have at that moment.
I guess these days there's a lot more to play around with, like I said, because you can do the facial animation, because you've got the full audio scripting. You can actually do that without having to really hammer home a point. Now you can be a bit more subtle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's players come with different. Not all players are the same, and they come with different kinds of preconceptions about what they want their experience to be, and sometimes you can open their mind in a way, and sometimes it's very complicated to do something where everybody sort of gets the same payload of information. But that's the challenge that every developer has.
I was going to say, with having to do that, with having to do something like that with a mainstream title like Wolfenstein, do you feel frustrated is not the right word, because I wouldn't say actually it's frustrating, but because you have to pare it back, almost have to keep it simple enough and broad enough that everyone can understand what you're trying to get across to the player?
No, I don't think one excludes the other. I think there are many examples of wildly broad audience projects that are really clever and have something really interesting to say. That's not to say that you necessarily have to be pretentious about it. Like, sometimes you just want a big fucking gun and shoot some shit, you know? And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's the marriage of that with something deeper that matters. That's what we're after.
I say, because I'd like to sort of touch upon, you're the man behind that very iconic darkness scene with Jackie and his girlfriend Jenny sitting down, and you can sit and just watch an entire film if you want to, Kill a Mockingbird. that's such a key scene, and I guess it's a key scene because of what happens eventually further in the story. Now I know it's an old game, but I still don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't played it yet. But did you find you wanted to have, you thought that was a very important piece of storytelling narrative that you had to get in there?
Again, it's not like we sit down and say, let's make a really important piece of storytelling. It doesn't work like that. It's more like, you know, you have this fire inside you and something you want to tell, and something you want to portray, or something that you feel this is what this moment needs, and then you just do your best to realize that, and how, you know, things that like you bringing up that scene, I love that scene, but it's one piece of a very, very large puzzle, and it's not like I thought, oh, that piece is going to be the piece that makes everybody's head explode, you know. But I think that's interesting too, that some things just, you know, they take on a life of their own, and people care about them for a long time. But it wasn't constructed like that, you know. We didn't sit down and say, you know, we need a moment that everybody remembers, you know. We just did what we felt was right and what we thought was cool.
I guess by the sounds that you guys are just going to continue doing that, what you want to do, as opposed to, well, it doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks, right?
It matters, but you can't have that as your guiding force. Like all good sort of creative art comes from people, passionate people wanting to, you know, do something or realize something, or take this thing that is just a fantasy and turn it into reality, and so that's what we'll keep doing.
Okay, listen, thanks so much for talking to us.
Thank you.